All right, so today we're talking about the future of freight brokers and truck drivers. We'll be taking a look at the services that you provide as freight brokers to your shippers and how you need to improve upon those services as we move forward into 2023 and the years beyond, not only to survive, but to survive and thrive. We're also going to talk about freight rates because you know, as business owners, freight rates directly impact our profit margins. And as profit margins widen, we have a much better chance at surviving and thriving in the years beyond. But when we have declining profit margins, that presents a special challenge for us. So we're going to talk about freight rates, where they are right now, and where we see freight rates going in 2023. So come on inside, sit back, relax, and let's get down into the business. So let's start off talking about freight rates. If you take a look at freight rates, profit margins, your overall income, and compare it to 2021, what you're very likely to notice is that there's been a significant decline in all of those areas. Now, there's some specific reasons for that. Let's start off talking about reason number one, the economy that we're currently in. The economy in 2022 is a different economy than we were in 2021. 2021, we were coming off of stimulus like we've never seen before. So there was a whole lot of excess money in the system. There was a lot more freight moving during that time, and there weren't as many trucks. When we take a look at 2022, we don't have that same stimulus. We have a dynamic that's happening now that we haven't seen in 40 years with inflation, and we have an excessive amount of trucks, an oversupply of trucks, and not enough freight. Now that's a Molotov cocktail for declining rates and continuing declining rates. Average nationwide rates, and we're talking about on a national level, not in specific lanes, the rates that I'm gonna give may be higher, may be lower than the rates that you're currently getting in specific lanes, but these are just on average what the national rate is. When you take a look at the dry van rates average, it's about $2.76 per mile right now. Reefer rates are currently about $3.19 per mile, and flatbed rates are about $3.14 per mile. So when we look at those rates, I don't see that those rates are going to be increasing anytime soon. As a matter of fact, I think that they're going to get worse before they get better, unfortunately. Number two, what we have to understand is that there are some people who say we're not currently in a recession. Although a recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, and we've seen that. But what they're saying is because jobs are so strong, the job market is so strong, we're not quite at a recession. But we're starting to see that companies are laying off people, individuals. So when that happens, we have the job market start to go down, which it very well could do. Sooner than later, we're going to see a recession. I currently believe that we're going to see a recession, a real recession in 2023, the first quarter, second quarter of 2023. That is going to have a further impact, I believe, on profit margins, on freight rates. And the reason for that is because when you have a recession, you have a whole lot of uncertainty. You have a whole lot of negativity within the market. And that is going to drive down rates. That is going to cut spending by companies. When companies cut spending, when they start cutting employees, we don't need as many products on the shelves because the people are not going to be buying as many products, which is going to further drive down rates. I personally think that in order to position yourself as a freight broker or a truck driver in the best position, you are going to need access to capital. It's going to be important that you start saving up cash if you have not already been doing so. And the purpose of that is so that you'll have a reserve to tap into, because you're going to need to pay employees, you're going to need to pay yourself, you're going to need to pay your bills. And when you have cash that you can tap into, you will be okay during that time period, or as okay as you can be. Now, I think that you probably should have 3 to 6 months, in my opinion, 6 months of expenses on hand to weather the storm. This is going to be your weather the storm money, because the storm, in my opinion, is certainly coming. If we look at the data, if we look at what's happening throughout the economy right now, we can certainly see that something is coming, something that is not necessarily normal. And recessions happen. They happen from time to time, but that's not a normal occurrence. So we need to know how to conduct ourselves in that type of environment. And what I am telling you is the more cash you have on hand in that type of environment, the better position you're going to be to weather the storm. Number 3, let's talk about trucking capacity. We mentioned that briefly earlier, but trucking capacity is much higher right now than it was in 2021. We had a lot of trucks come into the space, and of course, when you have an oversupply of trucks, too many trucks as compared to freight, of course that drives down pricing. Right now we have an oversupply. In the early parts of 23, I don't think that trucking capacity will be cut significantly, so we're going to continue to see rates go down. When trucking supply evens out, I think we'll have a better chance at seeing rates normalize. Number 4, what I don't think people are considering a whole lot, what we're not really paying attention to, is the money supply restrictions that companies, the economy is currently enduring. When you take a look at money supply restriction, what I mean by that is when the Fed is raising rates, of course businesses are not accessing the capital at rates that they were because it's costing so much money to get access to that capital. So what companies end up doing is cutting freight spend. One way of cutting freight spend is not shipping as much freight. And when you're not shipping as much freight, who will that directly impact? Freight brokers and of course truck drivers, impacting your profit margins. So as long as money supply is being restricted, and the Fed has been very clear that they will continue to restrict money supply, they will continue to raise rates until inflation is tamed. And I don't see that happening until probably the middle part of next year. So we can continue to see that our profit margins will decline, freight rates will continue to be on the decline until this problem is solved. Now let's talk about some things that you can do as a freight brokerage to improve your services so that you can make your business more competitive with larger businesses, so that you'll be able to move freight more efficiently. You probably are going to want to start spending money if you can. If it does not put you in a bad situation, you may want to start spending some money on improving your overall systems. For example, you might want to take a look at some LTL improvements, because I believe companies are going to be moving more freight via LTL shipments because it's cheaper to move LTL freight. So if you are positioned to where you can move LTL freight and move LTL freight efficiently, that is going to put you in a much more competitive space so that you compete with the larger companies, you can compete better amongst the smaller companies and get access to more freight. Now is the time that you want to be able to have access to more freight. Even though there's not as much freight in the market space, that means that you want to be more competitive within that space so you can command more of that freight. More freight means that you're going to be making more money. You'll have at least opportunities to make more money. So yes, we want to be wary of the money that we're spending. We want to be aware of that money, but we don't want to look at it and not spend if we can spend, because spending money on systems that are going to improve freight movement will certainly be in your best interest. Now, what I'll mention to you next, it won't necessarily cost you more money, but it will cost you more time. You're going to have to start talking to your carriers, building rapport with those carriers, and sell them on moving partial freight. Partial freight needs to be priced so that the carrier can see the benefit in moving that freight and want to move it. So it's going to take you some extra time to build a better carrier network, to build more carriers within your network that's willing to move partials. Again, I believe that partial freight, LTL freight, is going to be more in demand because shippers are going to be trying to save money. That is your job, to make sure that you can facilitate what it is that they want to do. And since they want to save money by moving more partials, moving more LTL freight, that's your job as a freight broker. So position yourself to be able to fill that demand, be able to move more partials so that you can command more of their attention and move more of their freight. So as I see it, the future is still very promising for freight brokers and truck drivers, but it's definitely going to be with more challenges. Challenges that we are not necessarily used to having to deal with, but challenges that we will certainly have to deal with in order to be effective, in order to be successful freight brokers and truck drivers that we want to be. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I certainly hope this information has been helpful. If you want to learn more about the freight broker business, there's a free link in the description to my 5-video series titled How the Load Movement Process Works. It will give you a really good look into the business before you come into it, show you exactly what you can expect. And then if you're interested in learning more about how we go out and use load boards to find carriers, how we use those load boards to go out and post our loads so that we can prepare to negotiate with carriers, I'll leave you a free tutorial right here. So until the next time, I wish you the very best in your life and business. See you at the top, because the bottom is much too crowded.